Hello, hi, what's up? It's me, Karen, your favorite booktuber, and I have been teasing this video for a while, and it's about time that I sat down and got to business. The book that I wanted to discuss, I also wrote about it a tiny bit in my newsletter, is Tropic of Cancer by Henry Miller. Now, let me preface by saying this has been on my list of books to read for a while because of the place that it holds in the canon. However, the reason that I picked it up in this time and place is so silly, we won't even discuss it, okay? Now, a little bit of context, not too much because I personally don't really want to delve into that, but I do think that you might need just a tiny bit of this just to understand where this book was coming from. This was published in 1934 by Henry Miller in Paris. It was banned in the States and in the UK because of the charges of obscenity. Let me double check that date. I don't know why 1934 is stuck in my head. Oh yeah, so the book was originally published in 1934, but it took some time before it made it to the States and the UK. Illicit copies were coming through on the ships and people were reading it on the down low, so this became a bit of a naughty cult classic, I guess you could say, but the obscenity charges were valid because this book is obscene. It drops a lot of, I feel so awkward saying this as an American, but it says cunt a lot, and it's really graphic at times, and it's description of sex. And then I think the book made it to the Supreme Court, and they were just like, you know what? Yeah, this book is trash, but it's still art, and we're not going to ban it. So it was given free rein to touch the hearts and minds and lives of Americans across the States. Anyways, having said all that, this is a book that is looking at the artist, the condition of the artist. It is autobiographical. It is very big autofiction vibes. It even starts with a quote, opens up with a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, which I will read to you in this moment. These novels will give way, by and by, to diaries or autobiographies, captivating books, if only a man knew how to choose among what he calls his experience, that which is really his experience, and how to record them truthfully. Now, having said that, this book doesn't necessarily have a plot, though there are episodic little stories and moments. It is more so an exploration of our narrator / Arthur Miller's life as an expat in Paris trying to write his novel and contemplating the role of the artist, the role of America, and how does one create art that is truthful. One of the things that this book does from the very first page is reveal to us that we are in a world that is very dirty. The depictions of cockroaches, tapeworms, lice, rats, whatever kind of vermin there is, like everything that we don't want to see on the day-to-day, this is the reality of Henry Miller. He puts you in that headspace on the very first page when he is taking out the lice that are in his friend Boris's armpit. He's getting up close and personal into Boris's personal space and letting us know that this world is filthy. And I think that is an interesting idea to consider because the ways in which Paris is often discussed is one in which Paris is so beautiful. It is very beautiful, but at the same time, there is this just idea of filth and grime and dirt and the insects of the very most base level of the world are present every day in Henry Miller's view of Paris. That is the world that he is encountering every single day. And we do not, that depiction, those descriptions do not slow down at all. I think at one point I started to write them down because I was like, it's really so much. Yeah, lice, bedbugs, dirty cockroaches, worms, describing humans as gorillas and chimps is another idea that pops up. I was just really struck by this. And I think part of that acts to show us the ways in which the modern world has fallen, that the ideas of progress and society moving forward is not possible if you really consider the ways in which we are surrounded by this filth and this grime. Also, at the very early onset of the book, we got a declaration from Henry Miller. I have no money, no resources, no hope. I am the happiest man alive. A year ago, 6 months ago, I thought that I was an artist. I no longer think about it. I am. And that is where the novel starts. That's where we pick up from. And we're kind of seeing the ways in which Henry Miller is trying to write. At one point, he ends up taking a job, and he's contemplating the ways in which this job makes his life possible, but also makes it impossible at times for him to create art. He's speaking about, it's actually so good. Where did I put my post-it? Pardon. For this book, I had to write, a lot. I was really going at it. This is at the point, and I'm kind of flip-flopping around here, so my bad, but this is on page 147 when he becomes a copywriter, and it was a job that he got which helps make his life better, right? Because he has money coming in, but he's fallen into this monotony of it, and he's speaking about his job as a copywriter. The world can blow up. I'll just be here just the same to put in a comma or a semicolon. I may even touch a little overtime, for with an event like that, there's bound to be a final extra. When the world blows up and the final edition has gone to press, the proofreaders will quietly gather up all commas, semicolons, hyphens, asterisks, brackets, parentheses, periods, exclamation marks, etc., and put them in a little box over their editorial chair. And then it continues to speak about the ways in which a copywriter is God, and I think it's really interesting. But that's kind of dovetails from the ways in which I do want to speak about this book. I do think that this is so hard, this book, to talk about. Anyways, though this book has no plot, as I mentioned, we get these depictions, kind of episodic moments, and these explorations of humanity. For example, at one point he is listening to an orchestra, and he kind of is having this really trippy moment. It's as if he's high, where he's imagining the ways in which some people are like coming to life and falling apart, and the ways in which the music is in the air. And that was a really interesting scene. But what I do think that this book is also doing, it is looking at America and progress and art. I know I'm probably repeating a lot of the same things, and though having said all that, I kind of saw this book as divided into 3 parts. It is also 300 pages or so, give or take. In the first 100 pages, he really steeps us into this world of filth and grime, but also I think that is when the depictions of sex are the most intense. At one point, he speaks about a woman's vagina being so large that it's a cave, and he can just stand in there and stuff like that. It's very silly. And also another line that he says is that, this is on page 5, I think, I make her ovaries incandescent, and I don't think I will forget that, because it was quite silly. Having said that, what we're moving towards is this idea of America, as I've said multiple times, and these first 100 pages are concluded by this, and I did mention this in my wrap-up, my most recent one. A man is visiting from India. He's part of Gandhi's freedom movement, and Henry Miller takes him under his wing, takes him out to some brothels. This really crass scene occurs, and then after that, Henry Miller contemplates the ways in which this man thinks that England is the problem facing the burgeoning nation of India, but that is not the case. It is actually America that is the problem. He says, this is on page 94, India's enemy is not England, but America. India's enemy is the time spirit, the hand which cannot be turned back. Nothing will avail to offset this virus, which is poisoning the whole world. America is the very incarnation of doom. She will drag the whole world down to the bottomless pit. And then as this kind of continues, he starts to just editorialize. He's speaking further about where he's at in his spiritually, I guess you could say. I lost completely the illusion of time and space on page 96. He's speaking about everything is endured, disgrace, humiliation, poverty, war, crime, ennui, in the belief that overnight something will occur in America which will render life tolerable. Then there's page 97 reminded me about Latvona, and then on page 98 we get to this idea that what has been destroyed has been his illusions. He himself was intact. The world was intact. It seemed to me that the great calamity had already manifested itself, that I could be no more truly alone at this very moment. I made up my mind that I would hold on to nothing, that I would expect nothing, that henceforth I would live as an animal, a beast, a prey, a rover, a plunderer. I go forth to fatten myself is how this section ends, and you kind of get the idea that he is so disgusted by the world that there is a cancer in this world, which this book is called Tropic Cancer, the idea being that America is part of that cancer, that the progress that we have reached that is crumbling and failing and has failed to really give people lives and meaning, that has fallen, that is the cancer that is taking over, and he sees that. And he recognizes that now it is time for him to plunder, to fatten himself up. Oh yeah, I guess this is another quote that I wrote. I don't know where exactly it is. Physically, I am alive. Morally, I am free. So then the next 100 pages, we're really working at this idea that culture is dead, and contemplating also the worker's plight. There are moments where he says that the most honorable person is the just everyday day laborer who goes out to their job, who is just tired, and you can tell it on their face that this is someone who works very honorably, but the system doesn't reward them and life sucks for them, but there is still something so honorable about that. At one point, he's also, because part of this book is also him chatting with his friends, his mates, and they're also like vagabonds and losers and artists who are trying but failing. And he's talking to this one friend. I think his name is Boris again. Boris, who I mentioned earlier in the book. Oh, goodness. And Boris is, let's just say it's Boris. Boris is talking about how he is going to be writing the next best, greatest novel in the whole entire world, but he's unable to do so. And then he speaks about how he doesn't need arms and legs to write with. He needs security, peace, and protection. So this is also another idea that we're looking at, the ways in which what does a writer need in order to create art. And it ends his section, his little monologue. All I'd want is a good wheelchair and 3 meals a day. Then I'd give them something to read, those pricks. And then as things progress, we end up with, as I mentioned earlier, as I read earlier in the beginning of this little video for some reason, Henry Miller ends up getting a job, and it's a job of a copywriter, and it gives him stability, but he doesn't really end up working on his own novel. Instead, he ends up getting fired. And this is when also you kind of dovetail to him talking about the ways in which America and Europe is different. He speaks about how in Europe he speaks about how in America we are told that anyone can become anything, that you could be the next president. And it's funny to think that he's writing about 1934, and I remember like this idea that you could be anything that you want in America is still so prevalent. And he's talking about the ways in which that can fuck you up. And he's like, well, in Europe, they don't have that idea. They're told to do something sensible, and look at how that turns out for them. That is kind of much better than being told that you could become anything that you want. And on page 208, he says, it's best to keep America just like that, always in the background, a sort of picture postcard which you look at in a weak moment. Like that, you imagine it's always there waiting for you, unchanged, unspoiled, a big, patriotic, open space with cows and sheep and tender-hearted men, ready to bugger everything in sight, man, woman, or beast. It doesn't exist in America. It's a name you give an abstract idea. Yeah, so that idea continues and progresses. He's been laid off, fired, and he ends up working at this school where he's teaching English to a bunch of French students, and he's kind of just like, why am I doing this? What is the need for them to learn English? Why should they learn English? This is pointless. And then at the very end, he, having said all this stuff about America, having spoken so poorly about America, he contemplates if he should return. The idea of it glimmers and excites him because he has just sent off his friend Phillimore, who was about to get entrapped by this woman who was going to steal all of his money and ruin his life. And having said that, I do also want to touch upon one more thing, which is the ways in which I do think like the sex that we are seeing is working to show us something in this novel. As it progresses, at one point Henry Miller ends up seeing his friend fuck this woman, and he talks about how, this is on page 144. I'm looking at a machine whose cogs have slipped. Left to themselves, they could go on this way forever, grinding and slipping without ever anything happening, until a hand shuts the motor off. The sight of them coupled like a pair of goats, without the least spark of passion, grinding and grinding away for no reason except the 15 francs, washes away every bit of feeling I have except the inhumane one of satisfying my curiosity. The girl is lying on the edge of the bed, and Van Norden is bent over her like a satyr with his 2 feet solidly planted on the floor. I'm sitting on a chair behind him, watching their movements with a cool scientific detachment. It doesn't matter to me if I should last forever. It doesn't matter to me if it should last forever. It's like watching one of those crazy machines which throw the newspaper out, millions and billions and trillions of them with their meaningless headlines. The machine seems more sensible, crazy as it is, and more fascinating to watch than the human beings and the events which produced it. My interest in Van Norden and this girl is nil. If I could sit like this and watch every single performance going on at the same minute all over the world, my interest would be even less than nil. I wouldn't be able to differentiate between this phenomenon and the rain falling or volcano erupting. As long as the spark of passion is missing, there's no human significance in the performance. The machine is better to watch, and those two are like a machine which has slipped its cogs. It needs the touch of a human hand to set it right. It needs a mechanic. Okay, that was a long portion for me to read, and I know I was reading it rather fast, but we're looking at the ways in which these two people fucking is worse than being like a machine. It has no passion. It is lacking anything. And this is interesting because within these 100 or so pages, we're also looking at the nature of work. We're seeing the everyday laborer, which is the work that Henry Miller is doing, and he's talking about how them doing this lacks any passion and it is meaningless. And it's interesting to also consider this when we're now looking at a time when AI discourse is big and everyone has 2 cents to say about it, and to contemplate the ways in which AI may or may not disrupt, or probably already is, but let's say how it will affect the art world and acts of creation. And yeah, I thought that was really good. I think that's most of what I wanted to say. I don't know. The final thought is maybe there is a discussion about how Christianity and religion is dead, frozen in time, that people hold on for so long for a miracle, but that miracle will never come. And then I have finally written, we are falling. Civilization has ended. We are the gutter. And with that, I'm kind of going to wrap this up. I did, initially when I was reading this, like when I was midway through, I was kind of just like, you know what, I've heard Tropic of Cancer is the best one. I don't think I need to read the rest of Henry Miller's work, because after Tropic of Cancer, we have 2 other books. It is a sort of triptych of a little situation. It's a trilogy, but I wanted to use the word triptych. But having gotten to the last page, because I was so adamant I wasn't going to do it, the last page has hooked me, and I'm eager to finish. I think the trilogy is called the Odalisque. I don't know. I am eager to finish the trilogy and see where Henry Miller takes us and what the artists will consider once they get to America. Okay. Thank you so much for watching. I would love to hear, if you've read this book, what your thoughts were. I haven't done an individual book review. What is this, a review? I haven't done an individual focused book video in so long, and there is so much to unpack in this book that it is like low-key kind of hard for me, but I appreciate you making it this far, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye.